Well, I'll tell you, I was apologizing to our roundtable group assembled about having to cut into some of Leonard Skinner because that is a fine old tune. I hope some of the oldies that I played today brought back some good memories for some folks. But now, as we progress with the United We Strike Marathon for October 12th, 2013, it's time to bring in a number of our hosts to do a little roundtable discussion. Currently in this forum, I have Matt Navarro, I have Larkin Texas, I have Suzanne Posel, I have Dinah Everett Snyder, and Am Rosen. And folks, you are live now. Take it away. Don't everybody go first.
Thanks, Gary, for producing today. I'd like to thank you and Alan and Detlef, our producers, for without you guys, we cannot go on the air. In fact, we weren't on the air a little earlier. Detlef had some serious technical issues. Couldn't get the European leg of our broadcast live today. Something happened to his technology. Hopefully we'll have that corrected next month. And then hopefully I'll be able to have some a setup here that if we have one of our producers go down, I can jump in and produce the show. But I'd like to thank our host for UnitedWeStrike.com. It's always a pleasure to listen to you all because you bring such wonderful knowledge to the table with such wonderful information and perspectives. And it's always a treat now. I look forward to these roundtables anymore, because it's always a treat to get to hear all of your opinions. And so for this month's roundtable, we can pick another topic after this, but I wanted to throw this out. We've discussed this before, but I want to bring this back because it is important, I think, in the awakening of humanity. And that is the topic of fear. We live in a fear-based society. We're taught from the very beginnings of our life. If you're Christian or part of the Christian world, you're taught at the very early stages of your life that if you are bad, you will live, but God will punish you by sending you to live in a fiery hell for the rest of eternity. And there it starts, right there, that seed of fear. You know, as a little child, that didn't resonate well with me. I thought, wow, that's a mean God. I don't want a God like that. I want a God that's loving. So I don't like that God too much, you know? And so they use that, and then you're taught to fear authority. And when you know, you're a kid, maybe everybody's an authority figure and everybody you need to be afraid of. And then we grow up with the fear of Al-Qaeda, you know, and the fear of the IRS and every governmental system now. We live in a world of fear. We fear the government shutdown. We fear new wars, and we fear natural disasters like comets and such. Everything is fear-based. And I was watching football the other day, American football for our international audience, and they have Breast Cancer Awareness Month, where every team has players wearing pink apparel. This is funky pink color, and they have this pink everywhere they wear shoes, they wear armbands, the referees have pink handkerchiefs as their penalty flags, and it's pink everywhere to make sure that all the women whose men watch football, or all the women who watch football, are aware of cancer. Be afraid of the breast cancer, you know. So you go get your mammograms that cause the breast cancer. So just be afraid, be afraid, be afraid. And it's always in our face. Everywhere we go, we're being taught to be afraid. When I think about that, and I hear, and I imagine that that's what keeps people who have lemming-like mentalities unable to see the truth, unable to see what their world is really about without having to be knocked back down by their own fear. Like Suzanne was talking earlier, we police ourselves because we are lemmings, because we want to fit in. You cannot step outside of the box and disbelieve that, Matt. Otherwise, you will burn in hell. Okay? So I personally believe that if we each try on a daily basis do one thing to educate somebody else or help someone in some fashion, fight the New World Order by giving them a bit of information to help eliminate that fear, because it's a lack of information that causes fear. You don't want to open that dark closet because that monster might jump out with his big teeth and eat you up. So if you can't see the monster, you're afraid. Well, you have to identify the monster. You have to identify them as being the Federal Reserve, the British Crown, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and how they control the world, and expose that little by little. And then our voices here at UnitedWeStrike.com will be heard a little more by everyone. And as that mass awakening starts coming to pass or coming to fruition, maybe just that little bit of light that sheds a bit of truth in the darkness will help someone overcome their fear. So let's go around the table and have your idea of how we, as a group of intellectual people, or intelligent people, help our fellow man overcome their fears. Who'd like to start? Em, how about you?
Yes.
I'd like to start. But
Oh, Vinny, hey, hang on. Let's go ahead. Em, go ahead.
Yes, okay, and I don't know if you're getting an echo on your end. I'm getting a real replay on mine. So
You might want to turn off your
my speakers are off. I'm just on head.
okay.
All right, now I'm
no
hearing
echo
what
for
I
that.
just said a minute ago, coming back. So
Let's come back to you then, Em. Why don't you get that taken care of? Vinny sounded like he wanted to jump in. Vinny, go ahead.
I'm like chomping at the bit with my adult beverage here.
Everything well with the wife?
Well, yeah. She's not my wife, not yet. We're going to get married in January.
Well, congratulations.
How to get rid of fear? Well, first of all, you got to laugh. And I think that's just my standard response, Oh, that scares the bejesus out of me. That's kind of a healthy reaction, I think. And it really cuts through that negativity. Sends a rush full of endorphins through your body. Makes you feel happier. Makes you feel calmer. Because the problem about fear is it stops people from thinking. That's the worst thing that can really happen to you in a world where all of your thoughts are having these manipulations and control mechanisms put down upon them and people telling you how to think. That's why they have to keep you afraid, so that you don't even have the faculty to think for yourself and think that, hey, this stuff actually isn't all that afraid. I'm not really all that afraid. It's like Will Smith in that movie After Earth said, danger is real. Fear is a choice. Make the right choice. Make the choice that is without fear. Be courageous. Like a knight. Courageous, honorable, and truthful. And you'll find that suddenly, all of these things that are really, really effing you off, suddenly no longer matter. Hello, Mr. Rosen.
yes,
Are you ready?
indeed I am.
Then go for your life, son.
Right back at you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm on. I don't hear anything now.
Yes,
Yeah,
you're
You
on. Go
cannot
ahead.
hear us?
Oh, no, I can't. Is everybody there? Okay, hi, everybody. You're talking about fear, okay? And one of the things I really work with in the process, I've developed two things. On a mechanical level, as soon as you're experiencing any degree of fear, doubt, confusion, or anxiety, you need to realize, no matter who you've convinced of what bill of goods you sold yourself, there's something you really don't understand. And because you're defending it, you're coarsening, you're layering, armoring because you don't want to be wrong. You feel inadequate in some way and you have to go with it. That's where the fear comes from. As soon as you realize, well, I don't have the answers here. What am I missing? You can't be wrong if you don't have to be right. Now, people, their emotional body gets hold of them and takes them on a ride, no matter what they think. Yeah, it makes sense, but I can't help it. I feel this way. They don't know where those feelings come from. The primal sense of fear that everybody on the planet has been grappling with takes place in the early developmental stage. It's a neurological juncture where the nervous system is suddenly gestalting to a new level of operation. It's when the intellect just barely, it's still 99.99% submerged on the subconscious level, starts to distinguish itself. You start to recognize yourself as an idea. That brings you into the duality mode of the intellect. There's nothing that anybody can think about without automatically and simultaneously implying its opposite possibility. Now, that has you chasing after yourself, and inadvertently, without realizing it, the feelings accentuate tissue disposition through the visceral organs in the body. So you can be singing the best song in creation, but feeling miserable and torn apart inside. It's an easy, once you understand where this mechanism comes from, to break it. And I mean break it permanently. Free up the nervous system. Then anytime you get a reactive space of fear, you can dampen it down. You don't waste your time and energy. There has to be host receptivity before any kind of a parasite can take effect, okay? And we're talking about social parasites. We're talking about the parasites of bureaucratic ignorance that want to maintain access to a power base because they don't know how to properly manage resources. But yes, it's imperative that the human race get past this very primitive level of that it's been operating on and be able to access on a more richer, more complete, more deeper, more far-reaching level these feelings without being locked into these repetitive patterns we've passed on from generation to generation.
Well, that really is a good point you make, that the being under fear creates stress on the body and then affects your health negatively, which is exactly the thing they want by the eugenics program that Suzanne and Vinny was talking about. So, Suzanne, you made the observation earlier that we police ourselves, and we do that out of fear. So your suggestions on how we overcome that or help our audience overcome that?
Well, first we have to understand, and I'll take the United States as an example. We have 80 years of hardcore programming that is multi-generational, that began right before the crash with Edward Bernays, with the government and the education system and the corporations. It's so ingrained in our culture that by the time I came around, it is part of my identity. My mother taught me these things, and her mother before her, and my husband is teaching our son things, and recognize and go back and read about what they were programming into us 80 years ago that is coming to fruition today, where we police ourselves, where we accept isolationism as a form of everyday occurrence and never question it. How we think that recreation is hanging out at the mall and spending money instead of doing something in nature, or go fishing, or just hang out at a lake and have a good time, or just spend time with friends. The fact that we don't even bother to learn how to take care of ourselves. We buy prepackaged food. We go buy a new shirt if our button falls off instead of learning how to sew. Most people don't even have a sewing machine. I grew up with a sewing machine in my house, but I don't have one. So this mentality needs to be recognized first, in my opinion, and then from there, the jumping off point is to recognize, be aware of yourself. Be aware when the program is coming out. And stop yourself in that moment, and it takes conscious perception of yourself. It can be very taxing, but over time it'll just be easy to recognize when the program is coming out, and then choose to consciously do something other than the program. Recognize that Common Core and fluoride and other things that are attacking our youth right now are causing an influx of a speeding up of the program to create complete slaves and automatons, and get involved in our children now, this generation that is in school, college, and K through 12. This is a very important generation, because they will be either later in their life, the first generation, or within their viable lifetime in their 30s, when they will be living under Agenda 21 conditions globally if everything goes according to plan at the time in which they hope that it all unfolds. So this generation who's in school, this is a very important generation. We need to capture them. Spend time with your kids. Find out what they're learning in school. Go to the PTA meetings and the school board meetings and fight a common core in your school. And every single day, recognize when you are wanting to support a corporation that you do not agree with. And the best way that I can come up with that is everyone get out a sheet of paper and a pencil and write down the name of all of the places that you patronize, everywhere where you spend your money. And that includes your utilities companies. It includes the corporation that owns your apartment if you don't rent from an actual person. It includes the bank that you bank at. And ask yourself, go down that list and ask yourself if you agree with the morals, ethics, and values of that corporation. And if you don't, then redirect your money to a local owner-operated location so that money is out of their hands and into the hands of your neighbors and friends who desperately need to keep their jobs and keep their businesses open and help support the middle class in this country who is being attacked every single day. Help them keep their jobs and their businesses, because once we lose the middle class, we're done for.
That's true. And that's in fact what they're aiming for, in fact, what they've accomplished here. You know, I live in a town or just outside of a town where we had 5 mills, paper mills and wood mills to process wood that was harvested in this area. Now we have a part of a mill that works part-time, and most of the wood goes overseas to be processed. But you were mentioning children and this generation, having to teach them. Yes, we have to. Dinah, you have children. How do you teach them to overcome the fears that they're being taught and programmed with via the social media, via the schools and their peers? And how do we translate that to helping our listeners overcome their fears and teach others?
You know, Matt, I'm really not a good example because I am the antithesis of all of that. I homeschooled my children. Of course, I have adult children, and then I have batch 2, as we refer to them. And so my older children were partially homeschooled and partially in the school system, so they all graduated early and went on to do wonderful things. But I don't run a conventional household. And so perhaps it was easier for them. And, you know, Suzanne, I mean, you really hit the nail on the head. Our children are our most valuable resource, and they have been forgotten in that sense. We as a society have crammed them into this mold and punished them excessively for any kind of creativity, any kind of spark of individuality. And that's my overriding resentment at the public school system and our society, particularly because my 11-year-old was severely autistic as a small child. And there were very few stores we could go to where he didn't have a reaction. And what was overwhelmingly interesting to me to have him in a store and have him get upset about something, because as a parent, it was so evident that this was not a child who was having a tantrum because he hadn't had a nap or something. It was very evident that this was a child that was under extreme stress. And of course, we'd leave right away. But without fail, every single time, there'd be the general public who felt absolutely within their God-given right to pass incredibly cruel or snitty or judgmental comments as I was ushering him and a small child out of the store. So I've made it a policy as I work with autistic children to really encourage the parents to make sure and take their children out in public. And when their children get upset about something and someone says something, to actually take it up with that person, because we have a zero tolerance society for anything that steps outside the norm. So in this way, our schools have been able to operate at an extreme disservice to our children, because schools mandate all sorts of behavior and zero tolerance policies that are absolutely absurd when you stop and think about them. I mean, most people shouldn't have to stop to think about them. They are just really that absurd. Like confiscating a spork a plastic spork from a kid, a kindergartner, a second grader, who's actively eating something out of their lunchbox with said spork, and being told that this is a weapon and it's not allowed at school, and getting a detention or a suspension for it. Where are parents on this? Why aren't parents immediately at the school? Why aren't they activating and pulling in other parents to demand that the principal address this kind of idiotic zero tolerance policy?
Because they're on fluoride.
Right. We have in so many ways, on so many fronts, day in and day out, abdicated our responsibility and abdicated our ability to speak and speak our minds. So I'm constantly being criticized or pointed out as being this adversarial person, or being very aggressive. People tell me all the time, "You're so aggressive." No, I'm not. I don't take things lying down, and certainly not things that are stupid. And more I encounter stupidity, stupid laws, stupid expectations. So I think my younger two children, I'll be passing the torch to, no doubt. My 9-year-old, of course, read a letter that she wrote to Target on our last marathon. And she had taken offense at some of the advertising that Target had. And she wanted to write a letter, and she did. And then she mailed it, and she was quite willing to come on the radio and read her whole letter on air. And that's the first time she'd ever been on air. So, and I'm a little different in that I didn't grow up in this country. I grew up in South Africa, and we grew up differently to the way that you have grown up here. And as Suzanne said, there's been this hardcore programming that's been ingrained in everybody culturally, where you've accepted the fact that the state is parent, the school is parent, the doctor is the authority. Everyone else has authority except the individual. Well, where is that going to take you? Nowhere.
I disagree with you, Dinah. I disagree. You are a good example here because you overcame fear very early on, and your children are not taught fear. So you're a good example of how the next generation can benefit from being awake and critical. You're describing yourself as people telling you you're being aggressive. No. That's being critical. Anymore, asking questions is an offense. Asking questions of authority is an offense, and that's why we fear the government. So let's go to Lark, and then we'll go to Gary for his thoughts. But Lark, down in Texas, we have this idea of freedom. It was its own republic. You still have this rebellious kind of streak running through the backbone of Texans, but then again, you're in a state where they have this illegal traffic stops where they can give you actual proctology searches in the middle of the highway for routine traffic stop. How do we overcome fear from a Texas perspective?
Well, of course, fear always emanates from a sense of self-doubt and a sense of lack. Oftentimes, this sense of lack is a false perception of scarcity. But moving on to your points about Texas, one thing that Texans constantly have told me for the number of years I've lived here, since about 1969, is that they were an independent group of people. But I haven't seen this in the cities. I find it more in the countryside than in the city. I see a bandwagon effect at play here today that is almost nauseous to behold. And yeah, it's true, and that's why I've lived as a hermit for practically 6 or 7 years. I'm actually working on a new career with, I'm learning entirely new information because I want to rethink this thing called independence. The behaviorist W.O. Watson said that fear would have to be the overarching governing principle in a new world order. And it's very clear that has been settled upon. by so many people. I don't see just the problem with Common Core. I see the problem extending all the way through the universities, in the professions, throughout society. And it is frightening in many ways. But from a Texan's perspective, I will just say this, that I think that it's almost a moral and an economic imperative today that we become independent and learn to be independent of thought and then of deed, first and foremost. And I think the first thing we should focus on is the nourishment and the shelter that we seek. Some kind of serviceable shelter, nourishment which is real and which speaks to optimum nutrition. So these are the things that I'm working on currently. I'm trying to keep things simple. I understand that people don't really want to listen to a lot of words nowadays. We've been programmed for sound bites. Everybody I know is multitasking nowadays. It drives me nuts. And I don't particularly like multitasking. I'm capable of it. I've run a business. I had a very complicated career that thrust a lot of responsibility upon me, and I've lived it. But I've also seen what it's done to people around me, and I see this every day, this effect that the people at the top have decided that fear needs to be the operating principle of global governance, and this is only going to work towards bringing into the world, frankly, a bunch of Confederates, partners in crime to pirates, but also slaves at the same time, because it is a system that has been thought of for some time. Giuseppe Mazzini, who lived from 1805 to 1872, he's famous because he was a correspondent with Albert Pike. And in Italy, he knew of this thing called the mafia, the code of omerta, that code of silence. But he famously said, "We aspire to corrupt in order to rule." So there is my take.
Can I? I don't want to interrupt anybody. Could I jump in with a few comments, or should I wait? All right. No system or method or technique works any better than the quality of intelligence that uses it. And I don't mean intellectual comprehension. I mean the ability to look at all the variables in any given consideration, see what their range of motion is, how they can interact, and choose what's most appropriate, adequate, and effective in terms of that. When we talk about teaching, this runs in every form of teaching, whether it's doctors teaching or psychologists teaching, religious people teaching, the school system, you name it, economics. The problem is that a lot of what we call people who are qualified are people who can comprehend and at least convey in a reasonable format the information that we want to get out there. But that's a small part of it. And what's missing in the whole teaching process is that in order to teach, we ultimately teach by being it, not just by reciting the ideas. Ideas may be inspirational. Just, I've been through many things, and of course, for almost 38 years now, I've had a professional practice integrating mind and body. But back in '69, I just graduated the University of Maryland. And I got a job in high school as a substitute teacher. I needed to do something. I was in transition. This school had made national headlines. They had just forced busing integration. So some of the kids from the deepest ghetto area of Washington, D.C., some of the kids from one of the richest suburbs in the country were all bused in. And they took up educational residence in a school that was basically blue collar. A lot of what you called bikers or hoods at the time, and riots broke out. They actually had the National Guard stationed out throughout the building for almost a month. And I kind of came into the middle of that. And I saw the anger, the confusion. You had a bunch of new psychedelicized kids that were really wanted to push the limits, and everybody was afraid. One of the first things I did, because you can always talk this stuff, but kids feel it. Their intellects haven't fully developed. They're still working on feelings, and they've been watching the so-called adult authority figures for a long time. And they can see the hypocrisy. They can see the fear in them. You're telling me to do this, but you're not happy. You're not together. So I remember having a class where, and they were pretty aggressive. Yeah.
And we're kind of getting away from the topic of fear. I wanted to get
all right, I'm sorry.
Gary a chance. Yeah, I wanted to give Gary a chance to respond to that. And thanks. Lark mentioned something that I think is very relevant here in our discussion. He mentioned that the American or the average person, not just the American public, but the average person through the TV is used to hearing sound bites, and they're not used to eloquence. And the people we have here on our panel are very eloquent and very articulate. And I enjoy hearing you because it is refreshing to me. In my everyday course of my life, I don't get to hear people who are so awake and intelligent and can speak intelligently about that. So maybe a fear of mine is that we miss some audience because we're speaking, in a language that they don't understand. But that said, I think we still need to have the discussion so that people who are able to awaken, can understand and overcome their fears. Gary, you live just in the vicinity of the Snake of Vipers in Langley, Virginia, where it's the home of the CIA. These are the puppet masters of fear-mongering, shock and awe. They put on the Al-Qaeda, puppet show for us, and then they make us afraid of Al-Qaeda, but then they still fund Al-Qaeda in other countries to take over governments. How do you deal with the fear? How do we overcome it?
Well, as soon as you said Al-Qaeda, I was real tempted to run upstairs and check
Gary?
under the bed. Yeah, what am I? Am I not getting?
Gary?
No, I'm coming through, aren't I?
Okay.
It must have been adult beverage time.
Yeah, it was time for my.
I'd be on mute talking to himself right now.
No,
He's watching the trucks out the window.
That could be. One of those trucks probably came and got him.
No, I know what happened. I just, I was trying to adjust things so that Am didn't get the echoes, and I probably just turned his echoes back on. But in any case, fear is indeed the mind killer. But when you stop and think about it, everybody's afraid. I mean, we talk about these sheep out there, we hold them in disdain that they're not awake. Well, I got news for you, everybody I run into knows the score. They know that when they go cast their ballot, they're going to be voting for, that giant douche or turd sandwich or whatever. They know that their vote doesn't count. They know that the education that their kids are getting in school is substandard compared to what they got. They know that, this is not really the world that we had hoped we were going to turn over to our children. But they're running scared. They are running scared because, they've got a job right now. They've got a mortgage. Chances are they're paying off their kids' college education because, the kid's now out of college and can't pay for their student loans themselves. They are running scared and afraid to speak up, afraid to rock the boat because so many of their neighbors have already fallen through the cracks. They see their neighbors' houses being repossessed. They know that people all around them are out of work. I think a lot of the reason why we do not have this so-called critical mass where, we have, millions of people on the streets of D.C. yelling and screaming at government to shape up or ship out. The reason we don't have it is because America is scared. And I suspect it's the same way in many other nations around the world. Now, How do you get over that fear? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I can tell you that I grew up during a period of time when we were taught to duck and cover under our school desk because at any moment the Russians could drop a nuke on us, and we'd only have about 5 minutes advanced warning. So you might as well just put your head between your legs and try and kiss your butt goodbye because it could happen at any time. Well, we lived through that. We lived through that constant terror. And not only did we survive, we thrived. I think that this next generation, given the chance, can thrive as well. But they ain't going to thrive under the plans that those who are in power now have in mind. So it's really up to us. If we don't dig in our heels and do something now, our children ain't got a chance. Our grandchildren certainly don't have a chance. So it really is up to us. And it's by our silence. It's by our silence that government perceives our acquiescence to their agenda. If you don't get up in their face, they just assume that you agree. So yeah, let's get up in their face.
I agree with that wholeheartedly because we are talking about the fact that our future generations lie in the balance right here, right now, at this point in history. We have no choice but to raise our voices, and I'm glad we here at UnitedWeStrike.com realize that. And, I'd like to remind all of you as radio show hosts, you have your own shows elsewhere, to not forget to make a plug for the UnitedWeStrike.com marathon because it's a unique platform that we have such informed people that can bring such good information and good guests and share that information to help enlighten folks because if we don't do this, who will? Okay, Dinah, you had a topic you wanted to raise, so let's give you the floor so you can bring this up and let's put it out for discussion.
Okay, well, quickly, I just wanted to add to something that Gary had said, and that is exactly that. We have this paradigm of abundance that we've bought into in this country that essentially is really an extreme scarcity paradigm. The more we've specialized and boxed everyone in, the more we've given away of ourselves. And so, we talk about how scared the population is, and by being silent, the government takes it as acquiescence. And that's absolutely it. And it's because everyone has a mortgage, everyone has a car payment, everyone perceives that they have so much to lose by saying no to the government that everyone has stayed quiet. And the problem is that everyone has stayed quiet through successive power grabs, successive land grabs, until we've literally been boxed in to a point where we have nowhere to turn. And it's come back to haunt us now. I was reading a couple of things that Suzanne has recently written, about the debt ceiling and Obamacare. And I think that I know that we're heading towards we're past the halfway mark of the show. So I wanted to get some of Suzanne's thoughts. Suzanne, you have an extremely pithy way of piecing things together, and I absolutely love listening to you speak. So would you mind sharing with us a little of where you see us at now and the very foreseeable future?
Where do I start? We've got this shutdown that isn't really a shutdown. Okay, they sent home the middle-class workers who are federal employees. They locked up, a couple of national parks. They corralled up and bruised up a couple of veterans, but everybody still went to work and is receiving a paycheck. It's not a shutdown, folks. Shutdown means close the doors and lock them, and you see a tumbleweed in front of the building. That's a shutdown. This is not occurring. What Christine Lagarde is saying, and I'm writing an article about this right now. It's kind of funny that you talked to me about this. What she's saying is the global economy would be absolutely devastated if there was an economic shutdown. Now, I find that interesting because that's the rhetoric Obama has been saying. Oh, all of a sudden, Obamacare is this really big issue. It should have been a really big issue when the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional, and the Obama lawyer said, okay, guys, we give it up. It's a tax. It's not really, okay, it's a tax. The government can tax the citizens, right? When Supreme Court says, okay, you can tax them. Okay, well, then this is cool, right? And Supreme Court says, okay, it's cool, as long as it's a tax. And then it comes out on mainstream news that, okay, guys, we fooled you. It's a tax, okay? We just forgot to tell you that part of it. So it's legal. All of a sudden, Obamacare is this huge deal. And it's willing to cause all of this confusion and rampant economic distress within the middle class. People are being furloughed. Small businesses are taking huge hits. People are terrified right now and are pulling back. And business and the backbone, the middle class of this country, is taking a huge hit. Now, when you take what Christine Lagarde said, that if we had an economic shutdown, it's far worse to the global economy than the housing bubble, the crash, even what happened in 1929. This is a perfect opportunity for them to take advantage of something that they created for a bogus reason to cause, or at least to create the perception that it is occurring, a global monetary shutdown with the threat of the U.S. economy as the catalyst.
Right.
So we are in a precarious position right now. We may be looking back in 10 years saying, oh, wow, it was that whole government shutdown fiasco that was the lit match to the end of the very long line that ended up in the explosion.
That's possibly true. This, I think, is a death knell to not just America, but then once they destroy America, the rest of the global economy, so that they can bring in the New World Order. Vinny, what are your thoughts on that?
I have so much trepidation whenever people talk about things happening in the future, that although there have been many, many top economists, trends researchers, etc., who have predicted economic outcomes in the past and seen them come to fruition. I think it's like preparing for a hurricane. You prepare for the worst and hope for the best. That's all I got to say.
You, of many words, have such a brief comment. I'm shocked. Vinny. Okay.
I'll take.
Happy to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Am.
All right. Listen, the average person, the global citizen at whatever level, they're living on a subpar level of health because of that's how most people have been taught to respond. They work all day, they're scared. Very few of them have had time to even read or think about, much less assimilate various philosophies, psychologies that give a sense of perspective, a way of gauging things. They get home, they're exhausted. For them, pleasure is, let me release some of the tension, let me relax. And everything is held right now in a state of dynamic disequilibrium. Yeah, it's a house of cards, but don't move the wrong one or it'll all fall down. To me, the answer, the absolute imperative is, it's like you have to deal with the world as it is and recognize the screw-ups and where they came from. But in order for it to change, people need to change. And by change, I don't just mean change their perspective, believe a different thing. I mean, they have to become healthier. They have to become more inwardly secure, have more access, more flexible access to their own levels of consciousness, so they can't be pushed around, intimidated, psychologically bullied, so they can ask for the kind of things that actually fulfill them. Become a smarter consumer. That's democracy, smarter consumption. But most people don't have access. So while we're holding back and calling out the stuff that needs to be named, that it really does, we need to start to develop a new evolutionary leap. Not just the idea of it, but we need to function. Everybody talks about fear. I will tell you unequivocally that fear as an overriding, paralyzing, sabotaging mechanism of consciousness can be eliminated, and whatever little anxieties can come up can be easily managed. But it's not an intellectual process. It's a process of actually grabbing hold and claiming that part of your nervous system that's been routed against itself.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, but that goes back to the point where I think so much of this panel that you speak so well, it is enlightening and hopefully educational to our audience. What Am's saying about the spirit having an effect on the nervous system, that fear affecting your body and your health is really true. Your thoughts on that? Let's see who's up. Lark?
Well, I must say, I have seen I've witnessed much talk about consciousness today, but I don't hear a whole lot of talk about something that we used to simply call conscience, which is a different word altogether. Consciousness is, in the sense that I think of it, it begins with morality. And what I have seen is a disregard for conscious, spelled like C-O-N, science, which is consideration of morality in terms of our behavior, and this much wider, much more widely applied term conscious, as in consciousness. So I have to say that I'm concerned about the bastardization of the language and how it is sullied and how people are bamboozled by this thing called language. For example, under community law, which is the law of the European Union, it's the same law that is inherent in the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's the type of law which is practiced at the International Court of Justice at The Hague, and it is the type of law which constitutes a body of law which is being overlaid upon all national law today. For example, they use terms of art. One of them is quality of life. Another is responsibility to protect. Now, both of these have prescribed meanings and interpretations within international law, known as community law or communitarian law. These things are never discussed. You can look these things up, quality of life, in any encyclopedia, and it's often conflated with well-being. And it's never discussed today, but this communitarian doctrine known as R2P, or the responsibility to protect, was ultimately the actual justification for the invasions of the Middle East that we've witnessed since 9/11. Nobody talks about these things. And so I'll just say this. It doesn't matter what your cultural heritage is. As it pertains to socialism, whether we call it fascism or communism, it doesn't matter. There's a certain regimentation of style and of language, because we understand that people are using propaganda and so-called public relations to push the society at large in a particular direction. But with the Hegelian dialectic, I see the interplay of this constantly. The right and the left, blacks against whites, people who are facile in their use of the English language, and people that are not, for whatever reason. And it's troubling to me as a person who loves words. Words, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, are what comprise our thoughts. And they are what drive our actions.
And
now,
they're
if we
also
don't know
used...
that... I'm sorry?
Oh, go ahead, finish.
And if we don't have the language for something, how can we identify it? Well, with the dumbing down of the nation's school children worldwide, and here in America, we can see what they want. They want something that's regimented. They don't want people to question authority. In fact, they don't want them to have critical thought whatsoever. And it's troubling. I recommend that we take a look at some of these things and discuss them honestly and openly. What I can recommend is Cultural Marxism, The Doom of Language. Just look it up. Another one is a YouTube video, The Noahide Deception. Why aren't we talking about these things openly?
What do you want to say about them?
I'll leave my passion aside for just a second because probably what I just said was controversial. But I can assure you that the law and the culture is moving in a direction that I believe is largely driven by the technology. And yet, even so, even with this interconnected, interdependent world that we live in, we cannot lose sight of ideals of independence, of critical thought, because they are important, because without them, then we become automatons. And eventually, we become either partners in crime, we throw our lots in with the criminals, or we are enslaved, and probably both. And it's a terrible thing.
Don't buy, don't comply, ask why. And that's what we're all about here at United We Strike. Gary, we've got a couple minutes. Your closing thoughts on this?
As far as the collapse of the U.S. economy or the world, there is some truth to the matter of, if the U.S. economy goes down, it'll be like a snowball effect turning into an avalanche, and that the whole world economy might be in the toilet. I can see how that could happen because so much of the world is dependent on the U.S. dollar for their foreign exchange reserve. So I can see how all the interrelated economics could do something like that. But it's just for that reason that I don't believe this radical economic collapse that everybody's predicting is going to happen in the fashion that everybody's looking at this like it's going to be one definable cataclysmic event is going to be the point of demarcation where, the United States collapsed and the next day Britain collapsed and the day after that Germany. No. It's not going to go like that. We have been in a slow motion train wreck of economic collapse for about the last 20 years. Ask some of your neighbors who've been out of work in their selected field for 10, 15 years. They'll tell you. People with educations that are bagging groceries at the local supermarket because I was the only gig they could find. We have been in an economic collapse for a very long time, and this economic collapse will continue for a very long time to come. They will not allow it to go down in a single cataclysmic event because they know that to do so would disrupt, they'd be killing the goose that lays the golden eggs. No, they're going to continue to milk this system. They're going to continue their raising of the debt ceiling. This government shutdown, it's all a big show. It's all done for the cameras to make you think they're doing something. All you got to do is look at it. I mean, what have they shut down? I mean, if you go through the airport, do you no longer get your proctology exam and your free chemo or radiation therapy? No. You still get irradiated. You still get a proctology exam at the airport. I mean, have they done anything to shut down the NSA? No. That's still going. All the stuff that is important to maintain the current world order is still in place. The only thing they've shut down are the things that just rub it in your nose. That, oh, if you don't let us have more money, oh, look at how inconvenient things are going to be. And it's all gauged to cause fear in the hearts and minds of average Americans that, oh, I can't go to the museum. Oh, I can't go to the World War II thing. You know, it's all done for show. You know, they learned their lesson well. It's all a big marketing exercise to sell you on the idea that the current order of things must continue. Otherwise, you're going to be horribly uncomfortable and horribly inconvenienced.
I entirely agree with you, Gary. It's political theater, and we can smell that. I'm just hoping the American public can smell that as well, because it is the new world order. Okay, we're needing to wrap up. I'd like to thank everyone joining us on the roundtable. It's always fun to hear all your opinions and just get to mingle with some very bright minds. Let's go around the table and give us your closing thoughts and some blatant self-promotion. Give us your websites and anything you want, any information you want to get out. Suzanne, you've been wonderful. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. My website is occupycorporatism.com. It's a headlines news website. I post 6 days a week. My show is Hardline with Suzanne Posel. You can go to hardlineradio.com. It'll take you to the page and show you where you can listen. We also have a YouTube channel. So if you can't listen live on our iHeartRadio, you can go to our YouTube channel and watch the broadcast. And thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we thank you for coming on. Vinny, of usually so many words, has been quiet through this discussion. I think I would like to think it's because there's such good company here that he's just trying to, translate all this into his Vinny mind. Vinny, about some closing thoughts, and give out your websites, please.
Okay. No. Wait. Let me start again. Yeah, I've been of very few words today. Sometimes things get really, really hard, and you can't see a way out of it. The fortunate business is, you're not dead yet, so there must be a way out of it. It's like my grandfather said, it'll all be all right in the end. But Granddad, what if it's not? And he goes, well, it's not the end. And
that makes sense to me.
And I did take that to heart quite a bit, because I've been through a number of very tough experiences in my life that have very, very much tested my very soul, my very sanity, my body. And I think that it is those really harsh experiences that indeed strengthened me enough to be capable of dealing with all of the negativity, all of the fear, and so on and so forth. Because I've seen it before. I've seen it before. I know what this looks like. It's like, if you've seen the new Avengers movie, bow to me. And an old guy stands up in the big crowd, and he says, not to men like you. And he says, there are no men like me. And the old man says back to him, there are always men like you. Think about this. We've been through this before, haven't we, as a human race? And we've come out of it. So if history is anything to go by, and in my opinion it's the most important thing to go by, because it shows you what works and what doesn't, good always triumphs over evil in the end. And then, after the good has triumphed over the evil, then the evil triumphs over the good, and we're back to square one again. Which I think is very good, because fortunately, at this particular point in time, it's the good guys' turn to win, because the bad guys have been winning for so long that it's just statistically improbable that they'll keep going on, let alone the fact that everybody's waking up and exposing their scumbaggery. Thank you. I'm Vinny Eastwood from the VinnyEastwoodShow.com, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day on American Freedom Radio. You can hear some exposure of some scumbaggery. Thank you.
Thanks, Vinny. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. It's always Nice to have your humor. Dinah, your closing thoughts, your websites, your show, please.
I agree. Fear is a construct. So my personal reality paradigm is identify those things that bring you fear, then prepare and educate yourself in the best way possible, and then relax and live your life. Kiss your kids, grow, enjoy. Essentially, come the end of the day, life is extremely short and it can be extremely pleasurable. And every time you grab onto fear, you have lost something of yourself. And you never want to lose anything of yourself, because we need to retain as much as we can, because there are so many people and so many events out there waiting to take a piece of us. So that's really my closing thought. I'm on Wide Awake News on Monday afternoons at 2 o'clock California time, where I talk about political events and rant and rave. And then on Sunday mornings, I'm over at ucy.tv/CC, which stands for Canary Chronicles. And there I talk about health and health matters and living a life of independence. Thank you.
Thanks, Dinah. Always a pleasure. We like hearing your voice. You're so articulate and informative. Let's go to Lark. Please give us your closing thoughts and how to get your information and any self-promotion you want to do there, Lark. Thanks for being on, by the way.
Well, thank you. I might recommend a very interesting, very short essay that anyone can read on the internet. It's available over at ukcolumn.com or .org, but it's simply entitled Our Common Community. Our Common Community. And it's written by a woman who lives about 250 miles north of Anchorage, Alaska, in a self-styled Gertie, or a Mongolian yurt. And she's been living in one of these things practically year-round since around 2002. And I highly recommend it. I also mentioned earlier Cultural Marxism, The Doom of Language, the video that you can watch on YouTube entitled The Noahide Deception. And then I have one quote, and I'll explain how you can find my work. The quote is, "What is hateful to thee, do not unto thy fellow man." This is the whole of the law. The rest is but commentary. And this was from Rabbi Hillel, who lived from 30 BC to 10 AD. And ask yourself, it seems that we have been told in Western society that something called the Golden Rule arose along about the same time. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And then ask yourself, why is it that we don't consider morality and or immorality anymore? But the new culture has settled on something that is moral relativist in nature. It is amoral. That's a word, amoral. And then look these words up. If you can find the time, you can find my work at larkintexas.blogspot.com. I'm just an American. Thank you.
Thank you, Lark, for your participation in this month's show. Am Rosen, your closing thoughts, and give us your websites and your shows, please.
Well, thank you. Pleasure. Closing thoughts. Nobody can do more for or with you, despite good intentions, than they can do for themselves. And please remember, what somebody can do for them to themselves, if you let them, they'll do it to you. If they can live in any form of denial, avoidance, suppression, out of anxiety and fear, then if they can, they'll do it to you because they want to see themselves on top. And that runs up and down the food chain. Whether the people in the power seats are have obviously attained some degree of skill in their particular space. They're not psychologically integrated. That's obvious. Now, we're either going where we want to go, which to me it always means whatever the consideration, a more expansive, a more inclusive and integrated state of awareness, because that's going to determine how you interact in the world, or we're getting rid of whatever seems to be in the way of it. The thing is not to fight the negative. Anything that makes you uncomfortable is nothing more than a misunderstanding. It's an opportunity. It's someplace, it's not wrong, it's not bad, it just isn't adequate to the needs of your comfort level, your dynamic. And so once you see what it is, it may have saved your life at some point, it may have worked in the past, but it's not working now. Then you understand, you come to see why you locked into it, what it offers, what it doesn't, where the rearrangements made, and you go on your way to that more developing space. You will find, if you like, on the homepage of my website, which is www.lifegame.com, you'll find a section in the front called The Geigers. And there are 3 ways of gauging. They're psychologically infallible. I know that's a heck of a statement to make. There are 3 ways of gauging where you're at and how to eliminate, not getting yourself into trouble, how to get out of the trouble you've gotten yourself into in your own emotional body, and how to move ahead progressively at a very comfortable level. Anyway, love to share with you all, and thank you for allowing me to participate.
We always appreciate your participation there, Am. Gary, Karen might be able to join us. You might. Can you look at getting her in here? In the meantime, I'll give my closing thoughts, and then we'll do our. If Karen's not able to join us, we'll let Gary do his thoughts, and we'll do our standard close. You know, the New World Orders agenda is upon us. If you listen to my show today with Dane Wigington, the Earth is at a tipping point because of the geoengineering phenomenon, the HARP technology. And we don't have any time left. The time is now. Humanity's opportunity is now. Can we mute that, please? Our opportunity is now to make a difference in the world. We have to raise our voices like we do here at UnitedWeStrike.com, and I encourage all of our hosts to promote this show as well when they're on doing their shows, because somebody has to be us right now. Somebody has to be UnitedWeStrike.com, alerting the world to what's going on so that they can not comply with all of this horrific drama around them. You know, they can be healthy and educated and remain alive in defiance of the New World Order. You know, Suzanne was talking about that earlier, about that eugenics program. We have to resist this by being healthy and informed. If we don't do what we do here at UnitedWeStrike.com, and you don't do as our audience members, the things you need to do to prepare for yourself and your family and prepare your friends and neighbors, because you're morally obligated to teach them the things that'll keep them alive. Okay, I believe that. We have to do good. You know, don't wish evil upon your neighbor, because you'll have that evil come back at you. Do what, you know, just like Ann was saying. So continue. I would ask the hosts here to continue participating in our marathons. I believe we're doing good work here, and I appreciate all of you participating. I'd like to thank our producers, Detlef, Alan, and Gary. And if we've got Karen on, Karen, would you like to share your thoughts about the state of the world and any closing comments that you want to make?
Well, I want to say thank you very much, and I'm just so happy that this is going on. And we were out today. I had to do some work locally at the farmer's market, and it's just wonderful to come back and hear you all. And, you know, we really have set a wonderful standard here of joining people all over the world. And whether or not we agree on the minutia, we agree on the fact that our world needs to change, and being vocal about it definitely helps us. I want to thank each and every one of you for your continuing contributions, and I look forward to rejoining the marathons here, hopefully in November. I also want to mention that, Lark, I really, really resonate with when you were talking about morality, because I believe that our world can be also reclaimed very simply when we have the time to step back and understand that the webs that we have been caught up in are partially of our making. And once we really cut through the crap, the criminals running all power, then in my opinion, we can see that the real true job that is waiting all of us is to be good stewards of our planet. And that has nothing to do with dollar bills. Good stewards of our planets, taking care of ourselves, our homes, our families, our local communities. And when we see that, and when we also understand that if you talk about morality, we have been so brainwashed into obeying authority that we've totally forsaken our morality. And for us to get all hot and bothered about the claims of Assad, gassing his people, so that we want to stop them by dropping more bombs is so totally ridiculous. You can't kill your people, which I don't believe that he did anyway. I believe the CIA was probably involved, the FBI, the government. Anyway, we need to stop killing each other. We need to stop allowing our leaders to think that they have the authority to murder people just on accusations. And once we do reclaim our morality, once we stop allowing these murders in our name, once we stop allowing murder and corruption, period, once we demand it from ourselves, I think that we can change it. And as well, I think that a tactic that we can start to initiate in our local towns is we know these policemen, we know some of these members who are really beating up the people or tasing them. We know these teachers who are silly enough to send our children home for having a water gun. And I think that that's the time that we need to show up en masse at the schools. If a teacher throws out a child for something ridiculous, that's when all the parents can surround the school, when drop what they're doing and go to school, or make sure that they show up. Our local courthouses, our jails, I think that we can do a lot locally to really start helping. But
Absolutely.
It's an honor to be with you and to start taking our country back community by community. And these people who are so out of line, I think we need to freeze them out. Just like they used to wear an old, a scarlet letter, the women who had sex before marriage, the big A for adultery. Well, we got a big A that a lot of these people who are running around should be having on their forehead, that we all know that these guys are the asses of our communities and we don't need to put up with them. Instead, we need to shame them into coming around to honoring ourselves. We need to respect ourselves first, and then it will spread out. And Matt, thank you very much. You're just doing an excellent job. You're taking over the marathons. Gary, and I understand Detlef had problems this morning, but we do have the international team of producers and guests, and it's a real honor to be included. Thank you. I was just sitting here listening, and it's very nice that you included me in here.
Well, thank you for your participation, and we thank you for your organization to help get this going, and then we continue this. Gary, your closing thoughts and your information website, self-blatant promotion, however you want to do it.
Yes, my blatant self-promotion. Well, I am Gary Hendershot, and I have a pseudonym on the internet. I'm very well known as Smart Scarecrow. So if you mosey over to your favorite web browser and type in Smart Scarecrow in your search engine, you're bound to find more than one entry. I do have a YouTube channel. I do weekly broadcasts related to alternative energy issues. I don't even hide from my bill collectors. So, if you're really interested in any of my material, search for Smart Scarecrow. You'll find me. I'm out there. And I appreciate all the kind words that everybody's had for the production staff. Anybody who's been on this end of the button pushing knows that it quite often doesn't go exactly as planned. But all things considered, other than Detlev's problems this morning, I think we've had a technically pretty good presentation today. I think Alan's handoff to me here in my secret underground bunker just 12 miles south of Washington, D.C., I think that went pretty smooth. All things considered, gee, I think we actually hit most of the buttons in the right order. What do you think, Matt?
I think you do a great job, Gary, and I don't think we'd be here without your skills every month and your voice. You know, I like your voice. Not only does it sound good, but you have good things to say. And I appreciate all of our audience for tuning in today. No matter where you are in the world, remember, we're trying to unite as a species in order to resist, not comply. We're asking why so that we can survive and then regain our freedom as a species. With that, I ask you all to continue to listen to our shows. Come back next month. Well, I'm sure we'll have a great show again. Thank you to all of our producers, our hosts, our audience, everybody. Until next month, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Death to the New World Order.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
All righty, and on that one, I'm going to take us out. I think we're going to do a little Jimi Hendrix on the way out. So everybody enjoy a little Watchtower.